Hey everyone, good afternoon. It is 2:31 and we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm sure we'll have more of your colleagues joining as the hour progresses, but in lieu of making sure that we are respectful of everyone's time, we'll go ahead and get started. You should be able to see my screen in the first slide on deck today for module A, Course A, Culturally Responsive Teaching. And Today, we'll be talking about creating a culturally responsive remote environment. And this also pertains to the environment within the school building as well. So if you cannot see the screen or if you need to share anything in the chat throughout, please do so. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and drop the note catcher in the chat. If everyone, when I share that, go ahead and make a copy of that. This will allow you to go through the day's activities and be able to take notes for anything that you might want to take notes on as we share and learn today. So once again, we are presenting module Culturally Responsive Teaching, Course A, Creating a Culturally Responsive Environment, and that could be remote or within the classroom. So welcome. I am Suzanne Brooks. I am going to tell you a little bit about myself and then give you an opportunity to share as well. I am originally from Dayton, Ohio, heart of the Midwest. I am the mother of two amazing young men, ages 24 and 25. It's strange to even say that, but I am an empty nester. And with that, I have always had a love to travel, but just wasn't able to because of my responsibilities as a mom. But now I can travel to different places that I've always wanted to go to or return to. And one of those places, as you see in the picture, is in Abuja, Nigeria, where I was able to travel this past year. I was also able to go to the Netherlands and Greece and Hawaii. So really have had amazing opportunities this year. And that's just what I like to do when I'm not being an educator. I'm currently working in a school district in Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. So I know most of you are in New York, or all of you are in New York. So it's really great to be able to interact and collaborate with you remotely today. So I want to know a little bit about who you are. I want you to be able to tell me what grades you teach, what subjects you teach, and share something that is making you happy today on this Monday afternoon. And if you could just drop that in the chat, that would be great. We have about 25 of us on right now, so I won't be able to read or share out to everyone. But if you could go ahead and just look, maybe you might recognize some colleagues that's on today. And so go ahead and just drop that information into the chat. Just type in the grade or grade levels that you teach, some of the subject or subject matters that you teach, and then share something that is making you happy today. Rashina Reed is a paraprofessional and she is with grade 4. Welcome, Rashina, and thank you for sharing. Lucia is an 8th grade teacher in math. Wow, always really amazed at you math teachers to seeing that's kind of was not always a great subject for me, but definitely appreciate great math teachers. We have Edwina, she teaches special needs. She is specialized in ABA, which is amazing. She's happy to enjoy dinners with family and friends. We have Candace, who's a special ed teacher. She's teaching in a 611 classroom, and she currently, lost that. 1st and 2nd grade. Candace is in 1st and 2nd grade. We have Anna as a paraprofessional for 7th grade and a literacy coach. Marlene is a paraprofessional in the 3rd grade. Karen is a teacher in high school, math, ELA, science, social studies, and it's sunny and the weather. Oh, it's sunny in New York. That's awesome. It's kind of cold here in the DC area, but she says it's sunny and the weather is beautiful. And you must be in a self-contained classroom, Karen, because you have a lot of subjects there. Candace is happy to be alive and healthy on this Monday, aren't we all? And Karen is a paraprofessional in the 3rd grade. Grace is with 3K. Genesis is a paraprofessional for 3K. and I'm assuming that's 3-year-old pre-K. Simone Barker is a D75 paraprofessional. Kenya is with 3rd grade. So thank you all for those of you, and continue as you join to drop your information. Just tell us your name, what subjects you teach, what grade level, and what's making you feel joy today. Thank you everyone for that. So we're going to have some norms and just really simple, just be here now. We're with each other for less than 60 minutes. And so in doing that, just be present, be engaged, stick to the protocol and hear all voices. So if it's something that you may not have heard before, just go ahead and ask questions. If that's something you'd like to do, just, put it in the chat. We started on time and we're going to end on time. I promise you that. We're going to take an inquiry stance. So that means that you're going to have a questioning mindset. So if something you want to ask a question about, please do so. Take responsibility though for your impact. So if you make a comment or give feedback, just know that we're being in a respectful environment today. And also as teachers, we know this, we're educators, we ground our statements in evidence. So we have definitely know that what we say is factual. We have a few more people that have joined us. We have Deborah, and she's a para for grade 2. Iman's a grade 5 para, and Christine is a 5th grade paraprofessional. Welcome to everyone. So glad to have you today. So this is the culturally responsive teaching series that we're going to be talking about. And this is the first course in 6 that we're going to be discussing. And it's about creating a culturally responsive environment. We know that when we were distance learning during the pandemic, we had to kind of pivot and become remote. Well, now that we're back in the classroom, what are ways that we can continue to develop culturally responsive teaching practices? Our agenda for today is the essential questions that we're going to explore. How does culturally responsive and sustaining education impact our students? How does it support their learning? And 2, why might including social and emotional learning support academic outcomes? Is one higher than the other? Some people say no. Some people say one is just as important as the other. And then what are our objectives for today? 1, we're going to define culturally responsive and sustaining education, CRSE, and we're going to identify the 4 principles of that framework. We're also going to develop social and emotional learning practices for classrooms, school, families, and communities. So SEL, social emotional learning. So as I said, for some of you who were already on the Zoom, I have dropped a note catcher in the chat that I want you to copy, and I want you to use that link to make a copy and then allow that note catcher to guide you through the activities that we're going to be doing for this hour. I'm going to go ahead and share it in the chat again for those of you who have just come in. And hi, Mariah. Mariah is a paraprofessional for K1 and 2. And so go ahead and copy that link, that note catcher, and allow it to guide you through the activities that we're going to be discussing today. So when I talk about culturally responsive and sustaining education, what is that? Well, it is a framework that New York State Education Department devised that establishes culturally responsive and sustaining guidelines for students, teachers, schools, district leaders, families, and community advocates, higher education, and the whole state education department. There are a number of levels of this, and like I said, the first one is welcoming and affirming environment. The second one is high expectations and rigorous learning. The third is inclusive curriculum and assessments. And the 4th is ongoing professional learning. So when you look at this framework, these are the 4 components of the framework. So the first principle, a welcoming and affirming environment, is a place that students feel safe. They want to come, they feel safe, they feel like they can explore and take risks and give information about themselves and be respected in that environment. All stakeholders in a welcoming and affirming environment feel like they belong. They feel like they have friendships, that they're able to make relationships with their teachers and their fellow classmates and other people within that building. Also, all people can find themselves represented and reflected. So no matter what culture you represent, you feel like you see yourself maybe in the curriculum, in the pictures, in the books, in the materials that are presented. You feel like you are represented and reflected in the things that you are learning about. All people are treated with respect and dignity. That goes without saying, but sometimes it deserves repeating. It ensures that all cultural identities, which are inclusive of race, ethnicity, age, gender, sexual orientation, disability, language, religion, socioeconomic background, are affirmed, valued, and used as vehicles for teaching and learning. So what that means is that no matter what walk of life you come from whatever cultural background you come from, you are seen as bringing something to the table. You are bringing the opportunity for others to learn about you, and you can learn about others. Within this framework, there's an expectation of rigorous learning and high expectations, and that is the second principle. When you prepare the community for rigor, when you prepare your students, your classroom environment for rigor, that brings about an ability to become an independent thinker and an independent learner, right? So academically rigorous and intellectually challenging environments exist. We also have to consider the different ways that children learn. Everyone has a different way of learning. Some might be more hands-on, visual, auditory, or kinesthetic learners. We have to know about that as we teach our students in which ways they learn. So instruction in these environments includes opportunities to use critical reasoning, right? We're developing the mind to take academic risk, and we're also allowing a growth mindset where students want to grow in their learning. And through this, they'll make mistakes, but they feel that it's safe to make mistakes. They feel that they can take that risk and learn from those mistakes, right? Okay, we have some others joining. And so I'm going to go ahead and drop the note catcher in the chat again. And you guys go ahead and make a copy of that. And that will allow you to follow along with the activities for today. All righty. So also, when we teach our students in this type of welcoming and affirming environment, they're able to see themselves with a positive self-image, and that empowers them and others to succeed. So when we talk about using an inclusive curriculum, okay, so that's the third principle. An inclusive curriculum and assessment, like how we know that what we are actually teaching our students is sinking in with understanding. When we use that, we use the curriculum assessment, which really helps to elevate those groups that have been historically marginalized and through their voice or through their achievement. It includes opportunities to learn about power and privilege in the context of various communities, and it empowers learners to be agents of positive social change. So there's that social component where we know that in past historically, not all groups were fairly represented, and there has been kind of a decomposition of equity. Also, it provides the opportunity to learn about perspectives beyond one's own scope, meaning that just because I might be in my bubble does not mean I can't learn from your bubble, right? It allows us to take different perspectives of people who have had different experiences, who come from different backgrounds and different cultures. And this really helps us to dismantle bias, right? Inequity, and it also helps to break apart those dominant ideologies in education that we have seen historically. The next component is the fourth principle, and it's ongoing professional learning, just what you all are doing here today, right? You're taking time out at the end of your day to come and learn and hopefully grow in your practice. So this is rooted in the idea that teaching and learning is an adaptive process needing constant reexamination, right? We're always talking about reflecting in education and learning and understanding what we can do better to support our students. Oops, sorry about that. Going. So also ongoing professional learning allows learners to develop and sharpen a critically conscious lens toward instruction, curriculum, assessment, history, culture, and institutions. And when we say a critically conscious lens, we're really talking about reflecting upon what lens we see others through and opening that and exploring and learning more about people who are different than us, right? So also in ongoing professional learning, learners must be self-directed and take on opportunities that directly impact learning outcomes. So that means that even though you're totally self-directed today somewhat and coming to this session, but also you might go on and read books, or you might develop a mentorship with someone, or you might go to podcasts that help you to understand more about your practice and become better in terms of helping to direct the learning outcomes of your students. So for the first activity today, we're going to reflect and share. And I want you to open your note catcher. Hopefully you were able to make a copy of that, and I'll share it again in a second for those of you who are just joining. And I want you to reflect on those 4 principles of culturally responsive and sustainable education that I just reviewed with you. And I want you to provide examples in your note catcher of how you use or participate in these practices. And you could go ahead and share in the chat. And good afternoon, Romana. I am going to put this note catcher in the chat for those of you who are just joining, and you can make a copy of it. If you're not able to make a copy, hey, no worries. Just go ahead and jot it down on a piece of paper. Go ahead and open up a Word document or a Google Doc, and you can use that to reflect and share. But we're reflecting and sharing the 4 principles of culturally responsive and sustainable education. And I want you to provide examples of how you use or participate in these practices in your classrooms, okay? And then just take a second after you reflect on all 4 and jot in the chat, share at least one of those examples. And I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to work on that. So for those of you who are just joining, we're reflecting and sharing about the 4 principles of culturally responsive and sustaining education. I shared in the in the chat, the note catcher that you can use through this activity. We have about 1 minute. Thank you for those of you who have already shared in the chat. We'll read some of those out in about a minute. Thank you. Okay, about 30 seconds. And go ahead and share in the chat how you use these concepts in your classrooms. I'll start reading some of them out. Kenya says respecting everyone's beliefs. That's true. We all come with different experiences and different opinions and different beliefs, and we have to learn to respect what our coworkers, our peers, our students are sharing with us. Having lessons that involve students' different cultural experiences in their neighborhoods and backgrounds. That's a perfect example. Making sure that no one feels left out, that everyone feels the ability to share, right? Thank you, Kenya. Marlene says giving them topics that they can relate to, right? Because when we do that, they become engaged. Edwina says having open communication within the classroom and giving time in the beginning session to express themselves about anything they want to tell me or write down if they are shy. And that's a great way of building that culturally responsive environment where everyone feels that they belong. Thank you for that, Edwina. Rumana says that have friendly and confirming ambiance. That's the environment of a whole, right? They want to see themselves represented. They want to be comfortable in that space, have strict guidelines and high standards for performance, right? That rigor, have curriculum assessment that is inclusive, right? Everything is not a one size fit all. There's different ways that we can give students information, instruction, and there's different ways that they can let us know that they are learning and understanding and are engaged. Thank you for that, Romana. Having continuous professional education like we're doing today. Edwina says having more than one lesson on different cultures, neighborhoods, and backgrounds. Awesome. I love that choice that you're saying is so important. Marisol says being on the same page with everyone, and that means you might be different. You might have had a cultural experience, but you're respecting what other people are bringing to the table. Karen says that using daily affirmations, I love daily affirmations of respect for all, using differentiation for the different learners because we all learn differently, always share out what we write to empower others, kind of like what I'm trying to do now, and always looking for one way to improve her pedagogy, always looking to grow in her profession. Love it. Grace says reading books that relate to the student's culture, which will give them a sense of belonging, right? Seeing themselves represented in the curriculum. Chloe says that setting class expectations at the start of a year for how we treat each other, equipment. This is showing respect, not only respect for the materials, but respect for each other. Also finding opportunities to demonstrate learning in different ways because we all learn differently. Thank you, Chloe. Joan says having a welcoming and affirming environment. She does this through examples of flags representing different cultures on the walls or on the bulletin board, and seeing students get excited about the things that represent them and their culture. Definitely. Shiraz says be empathetic and caring instead of reprimanding a student for just for being just welcome the student and let them know you're happy to see them today. You can just do that with a smile. And even if you don't feel well, as teachers, we have to be great actors, right? We have to represent the mood that we want to see reflected in our students. And so you make it to school and you have to be genuine as possible. Chloe also says making connections to different cultures through instruments around the world, because we all relate to music. We do. Anna says she forms relationships. That is like at the heart of building student confidence and building student learning. And she does this by looking at the various student interests where they feel comfortable and safe. And when they're comfortable and safe, they'll take risk in their learning. And also they feel very comfortable to the point where they have previous students who continue to seek her out and come and get her advice and assistance. And that is just at the heart of being a teacher. And also by looking at different cultures. Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. Those are great, great, great responses. I hope those of you who hadn't done some of those things, go ahead and jot those down in your note catcher, and you can take them back to your classrooms. So when we look at culturally responsive teaching, this is also known as culturally relevant teaching, and it is a pedagogical approach that recognizes the importance of including students' cultural references in all aspects of learning. So CRT focuses on improving the learning capacity of diverse students who have been marginalized. It centers around the effective and cognitive aspects of teaching and learning, and we know this through research. It is involved with building cognitive capacity, right? Developing our ability to think and to respond. and to develop an academic mindset where we trust and believe in our abilities. It moves students from being dependent learners to becoming independent learners. Success, right? That is the ultimate success. CRT means recognizing and getting rid of bias in the educational system, like those long touted historical norms, no more. It really targets students' background and culture to develop curriculums and instruction. And it also uses real world issues for discussing and learning, because we know that's where our students really become engaged, when they can really relate to what they are discussing and learning about. Culturally responsive teaching really sets high expectations for students to learn. It really highlights the diversity in our classrooms, that everyone is bringing something different to the table and we can all learn from each other. It supports collaboration through families and community and students within the classroom. And it also provides linguistically and culturally responsive communication, because as many of you said, there's different ways that our students learn, and there are different ways that our students can tell us what they know. And we also want to reflect through a cultural lens. We talked about, even though we all come from a specific culture or maybe multi-cultures, we can learn from other cultures, and we have to be able to reflect on that and open ourselves up to learning about others. We want to integrate into classroom instruction, culturally responsive teaching methods that have important benefits. These benefits include strengthening students' sense of who they are, their sense of identity. It promotes equity and inclusivity in the classroom, which again makes the classroom safe and allows students to take risks in learning. It really allows students to engage, to be motivated when they look at the different materials that we're offering them in learning, and it supports their critical thinking. It builds upon their intelligence. So next, we're going to listen to a short clip about creating a welcoming and affirming learning environment.
Racial and cultural identities are critically important. And we have to acknowledge that the way we have set up opportunities for learning and development are not always respectful of the diversity that we have in this country. As we are thinking about how to maximize chances that young people are thriving, it's important to let them lead with their identity. Not bury it, but lead with it. Show it off, be proud of it, actually display it, to perform it, to put it up on the stage, to put it up on the screen, to make videos about it, to write poetry about it. So they are really bringing themselves into the room. If I come into a space and I don't trust this space and I don't bring my full self into this space, the behavior that you see may not be reflection of my competence. It's a reflection of me not being motivated to show you what I have because I don't trust this situation. If I don't have a relationship with you and I don't get to be a little bit more of who I am, you're going to slow down my learning and development by not knowing it. Schools and community organizations and families and the overall sort of environment of the community are all playing a role in shaping the experiences and contexts and relationships where learning happens. That basically is what the science of learning and development has told us, that all adults, all settings, all experiences matter.
I like that clip. It's short, but she's really direct and gives us some really great nuggets. Some of the things that I took away from the clip is that we have to maximize opportunities for student thriving. And how do we do that? We lead with students showing who they are, building their own, showing their identities in a space and leading with it. And she says that in order to trust the space that you come into, in order to do that, and you have to trust the space so that you can show your full competence, that you can show really what you're capable of. And she says one of the best ways to do that is to build relationships. She said that building relationships accelerates learning because once again, we talk about trust. We talk about the ability to show your full competence, and we talk about the ability to take risks in those type of environments. So next we have activity number 2, and I'm going to once again share in the chat the note catcher that you can write on, or if you don't want to use a note catcher, no problem. You can just use a piece of paper and a pencil. But in this activity, I am going to put you into different breakout rooms, and you're going to discuss how identity impacts student learning. Okay. The second thing you're going to do is talk about how you build and affirm that identity in your classrooms. And then I want you to just a couple of you just to share in the chat. So you're going to discuss how identity impacts student learning, and you're going to talk about how you built that identity in your classrooms. All right, here we go.
Solo quiero despertar.
So as you return, go ahead and drop some of the things that you shared in your breakout rooms about how you create identity, affirming identity in your classrooms, or how you have seen it being created in your classroom, or something that maybe someone said that really stood out to you. I think everyone is returning. So go ahead and share in the chat some of the things that you might have discussed. Lucia said, including students' cultures and interests into word problems for math. They get so excited when they see that, don't they? That's a great way to affirm your students and who they are and their cultures and their experiences. Anyone else? Don't be shy. I'm going to go forward, but I will continue to look back and see what you said in the chat. So promoting equity. The basic definition of equity in the classroom is providing all students with the specific tools that they need to be successful. So when we say specific tools, it is not a one-size-fits-all. Some students might need visuals. Some students might need auditory. Some students might need more choice, right? Some students might need to work independently. Some students might work better in small groups. So equity is providing all students with the specific tools that they need to be successful. Teachers should always be looking and listening in their classrooms for bias, oppression, and other subconscious identity-based assumptions and stereotypes that students bring to the classroom. They don't necessarily do it knowingly. Sometimes kids can be a little hurtful, but you should always be on the lookout for it, and you should guide it, and you should dismantle it so that it does not exist in your space. You should address the situation immediately through informative and enlightening classroom discussions. So we're not shying away from these discussions that are rooted in bias or oppression. We're going to talk about them openly but respectfully. We're going to give guidelines to our students about how to do that, structure. We're going to call attention to the comment that a student might have made that was hurtful and explains why it demotes inclusivity and why it is not accepted in that space. We are also going to understand why the commenter's experiences or backgrounds led to those biases that we might see or hear. We're going to communicate the expectations in our classrooms, which sets the tone for learning for all students so that they can be safe, so that they can take risks, so that they can learn. I see we have some great things in the chat. Grace says having books in the classroom from different cultures so students can become knowledgeable of other people's cultures, right? So not only do we want to see identity about ourselves, but we also want to know about others. That's how we grow, right? Anna says, I believe by boosting each student's confidence, they feel comfortable in the classroom and in participating. Jones said she spoke about being introduced for the first time to transgender identity in her class this year, which opened up varied identities and allowed to guide the multitudes of identities and how we need to respect and provide a safe place for the class community, right? So there are different types of identities that we look at, and we have to celebrate them all. Romana says we celebrate all cultures and holidays. Grace talks about Heritage and Culture Day, where students can discuss their customs, food, music, etc. Grace says that she thinks that trying to learn some words of different students' language gives them a sense of belonging, right? Because they see themselves seen, it's familiar. It makes them feel proud and validated, and it puts a smile on their face, as she says. Also, Grace says if there's a lot of students from the same culture, you can create a club, right? So you have some type of synergy there. So students may feel like they have a village, very important, because even though, we all want to be together as a community, sometimes when we come to each other in subgroups, it's also very welcoming and affirming, and it feels good. So Maya says we help shy students to express their thoughts by encouraging them to speak up or put them in small groups and ask them to discuss the topic with others. That could be small groups, it could be pairs, it could just be you and the student. Iman says, helping them through all of their emotions by providing a safe environment, because we know we have a range of emotions to get through in just one day with our kiddos. Kenya says, let students be themselves, then pair them with others that don't know the same thing as them so that they can learn from each other. Perfect. Marisol says children are shy and they're just trying to fit in, right? They want to take that risk, but they just sometimes need a safe space to do it in. So thank you. Joan says, Chloe expressed using music to affirm a student's identity, because music can be a common identifier because it all sounds so good. Lucia says include students' cultures and interests into word problems from math. So we talked about that as well, and that's always fun. So promoting inclusivity, right? So we look at Universal Design for Learning, UDL, and it looks different in every classroom, but it does focus on building learning for all students. It provides intentional but flexible options. So it's structured, but there are different options, different choices. It gives students access to resources from the start of a lesson to the end, right? You just don't, you can look at different resources at the beginning. It might be how a student might learn, and then they have a different opportunity to show what they've learned. It supports students building and using their own learning. When you try to promote engagement in these welcoming and affirming environments, how does that look? Well, you use different instructional strategies that result in students responding differently. So we might have active student engagement, which is critical to active success, right? If a student is not engaged, then they're not learning. Teachers must initially build positive student-teacher relationships to encourage that engagement and motivate students who might be shy or reluctant. And we also want to be able to connect to students' lives outside of the classroom, right? When a student comes in, like someone said, just tell us something about what's going on with you. And that really helps to make that connection and build that relationship. Provide opportunities for student choice and cooperative learning. Students love to work with each other, but they also like to have the ability to use materials or instructional opportunities for things that interest them. And also, we need to provide our students with continuous feedback, right? Even if it's something that's not so great, the way we kind of center it or couch it can make that feedback a positive experience for the student. So we want to support learning. We want to support understanding. We want to support critical thinking for our students. The root of culturally responsive teaching is in the relationship with social justice. We talked about marginalized communities and groups. Well, when we support critical thinking, they're able to really move that needle in terms of social justice, because now they know and they can think through things and they can support how to express themselves and teach others. When we talk about culturally responsive teaching approaches, we can support culturally diverse students that have been marginalized, right? The focus of culturally responsive teaching, according to Gloria Lattinson Billings, is to prepare students to question structural inequality, racism, and injustice in society. We know that teachers acquire knowledge about culturally responsive teaching through intentional actions, okay? So we talked about being intentional, learning, going to professional developments, developing relationships with mentors, things of that nature. So what are some of the culturally responsive teaching strategies that we can see? If you have, can everybody say, thank you. We can activate students' prior knowledge, meaning what do they bring to the table? What do they already know? We can make learning contextual, so we can make it so that it reflects their community or what's going on with them. We can also encourage students to leverage their cultural capital. We can reconsider our classroom setup, and we can build relationships. So students are not blank slates. They enter the classroom with diverse experiences, and teachers should encourage students to draw on their prior knowledge in order to contribute to group discussions, which provides an anchor for learning, right? It builds that engagement piece we talked about. Taking a different approach to the literature that's taught in classrooms is one example of this. So when we activate students' prior knowledge, we might make different things. Before reading, we might have a KWL chart, what we know, what we want to know, and what we've learned. We might have turn and talks. We can have brainstorming. We can have think, pair, shares. During reading, to activate students' prior knowledge, we might model how to make meaningful connections. We could teach students how to make connections with the text to themselves, right? Like, this is my identity in this text. I see myself. We can look at other texts to make connections. It may not be quite our identity, but we can definitely relate to what's happening. There's like a common thread here. And we can also look at texts that really activate students' prior knowledge. And it might be something that's worldly, something, a foreign land, something that they've never heard of, but they can still see common knowledge and say, hey, even though this is somewhere that I've never been or a culture that I don't know about, this is something that I do in my own household. This is something that I have also experienced. This happened to me. We all have commonalities. It might be, a relative getting sick or a friend moving away. We all have common experiences. So after reading, we can discuss how our prior knowledge, right? We go back to how did this happen to you? And it also happened to the student in the text. This student felt this way. How did you feel? How did you guys relate to each other in that instant? And it really builds that understanding and that comprehension. So I want you to open up your note catcher again, and I'm going to drop it once again in the chat for those of you who might have dropped off or who did not get it. And I want you to write down some strategies that you use in your classrooms or that you've used in the past, or maybe when you were a student, that activate students' prior knowledge. So how do you think students' prior knowledge is best activated when they are learning? Go ahead and share out in the chat. You guys have been really vocal in the chat today, and I love it. Thank you. So go ahead and take about 1 minute and jot something down in your note catcher and then share it in the chat, or you can just share it in the chat. Let's see, we have a couple things in the chat. Let's see what some of you are saying. Oh, turn and talks, definitely. You just have a partner and you turn and you talk to your partner about something that you discussed in the classroom. You might have a show and tell. I always love those. Something you can bring in about your identity or your culture and show others. You might have a KWL chart, a group discussion, a picture parade, love it. You can report the news activity that has you excited. Another gallery walk. Yep, these are all great things that we all can use. You can use case studies, definitely always important, because they are usually research-based as well. Show and tells, cohort discussions. Interesting, love that. You can engage them using the knowledge you have that they did not know you have, because sometimes they are just like, wow, you're a teacher and you have things in common with me. You can show pictures and see what they know about them, right? These are all great. Thank you, guys. Continue sharing. So how do you activate students' prior knowledge in your classrooms? So how do you make learning contextual? How do you tie lessons from the curriculum to the students' social communities to make it more relevant? For example, if students are reading a chapter in a history class, you can encourage them to discuss why it's historical, but why does it matter today, and how does it impact their school or their community? You can really ask students to take the concepts that they're learning about, okay, because that could be in math or science, and create a project that really allows them to show the commonalities, that shows the parallels. We know there's not a one size fits all approach to learning, and you can have this, you can contextualize to teacher and student lives and experiences, right? So as teachers, we have to be able to share as well about ourselves, and that really helps promote that relationship, that promotes that sense of belonging. And we can also offer more choice in our contents where students can select sub-content within the standard. So it might be using some type of dramatic impression to show the standard, or it might be making a poster board to show the standard, or writing an essay. But there's definitely more than one way, and to show that you understand a standard. You can choose topics related to a skill, and this can apply to skill-based instructional goals and standards and other content as well. So how do you leverage cultural capital? Let's listen to this really brief video, because we know that not all students come from the same background. So how can those who don't have a voice find their voice, and how can we learn to say to that student, we want to hear about you, we want to hear about your experiences, how can we leverage what the culture that you come from?
In this 60-second sociology, we're going to look at the concept of cultural capital. Cultural capital is a concept that is associated with the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu. He suggested that cultural capital is the value that is given to an individual's cultural habitus, that is, their attitudes, tastes, and attributes, in a specific field. The education system is based largely on the values of the middle-class habitus, and this puts pupils from middle-class backgrounds at an advantage. The rejection of the working class knowledge and skills, the rejection of their cultural habitus, can lead to marginalization, what some sociologists have called symbolic violence. This places them at a disadvantage in the education system and has the potential to lead to underachievement.
Okay, so that was short and sweet, but what it basically says is that historically there's been a hierarchy where those at the upper echelon of socioeconomic advantage, their knowledge was usually seen as more important than those who are maybe in the middle or the bottom. And so that really leads to a rejection of the things that they bring to the table, their cultural knowledge, their cultural skills, their cultural abilities. And so this is what we really need to leverage, all of the experiences that our students come into the classroom with. Okay. So this is our last activity. I want you to open your note catcher or just write on a piece of paper examples of cultural capital, right? How can you utilize students' cultural capital to engage student learning? What is cultural capital, and how can you utilize that to engage student learning? I'll give you about 1 minute to work on that one. Take about 30 seconds. All right. So when we talk about engaging cultural capital, we might say engaging the different languages that a student brings to the table. It might be different countries that they've lived or places that they've lived. It might be different ways or norms of doing things in their families. It might be different experiences that they've had thus far. So those are ways that we can really use in cultural capital and engage that with our students. And a lot of you have already said that through things like show and tell, through turn and talks, through think, pair, shares, things of that nature. So when you think about how your classroom looks and how can that really support culturally responsive teaching and affirming environments. Consider the images and messages that you use to display in your classroom. It could be on your bulletin boards or your walls. And look at your classroom libraries. Do they include diverse authors? Do students see a reflection of themselves in these books? Students should have the opportunity to look at different, their own identity, but also other identities that reflect themselves. Building positive relationships, and many of you have gone back to this in your chats. You can engage in self-reflection. You can understand and dismantle unconscious biases through building positive relationships. You can become curious about culturally diverse students and their families and their communities. You create welcoming and affirming environments through positive relationships. You acknowledge cultural identities, which we've talked about for the last hour. We create safe spaces, and we also provide resources that show our different identities, that show the diversity that we all bring. And we allow students options or choices in learning and assessment. And we hold high expectations, believe that all students will succeed. Cultural capital, Pauline says, knowing your students' strength and weakness, love it. And Grace says that she would say use pictures, and if you're learning about a culture the student is coming from, have them actually speak about it. That can really build a sense of understanding for other students, but also of pride and being able to share about their cultural identity. So those are great examples. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of our course today. And I want to thank you all. You've been great in sharing and giving feedback and supporting each other today. So I really do appreciate that. I hope that you sign up for more courses throughout the year. They will be offered. They can be offered either synchronously or like today or asynchronously. And go ahead and scan that QR code there. That will allow you to sign up for those courses. I want you to know that your CTLE credit will be delivered to your email within the next 24 hours. So you definitely will receive that in your email. Also, you have the opportunity to earn a $50 Amazon gift card if you refer any of your fellow staff members to any of the synchronous or asynchronous courses. You automatically will receive the $50 Amazon gift card for your classroom, and make sure that you use your unique referral code for that. So go ahead and send out those. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you. Make sure you send out those referrals. Now, I want to hear back from you, so I'm going to put a link in the chat, and it's like a two-minute survey that you can take. If you don't take it, don't worry, you will still get your certificate, but I'm going to stop sharing and then drop that into the chat.